Whether or not you shake or you stir a cocktail, you're really trying to achieve three things. And that is to mix the drink thoroughly, to chill, and to dilute. And knowing when and why and how to do it correctly is important. So welcome back to Drinks with Dave, and today we're gonna go over all of those things as well as techniques and what not to do. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Okay, let's go ahead and start with shaking. Shaking is a way to mix a cocktail that has lots of ingredients that won't mix together very easily, or ingredients that are very thick and heavy. And since the goal is to mix everything together thoroughly, shaking is a way that helps to emulsify all of those ingredients that have different textures and densities. If you're ever wondering, should I shake a drink or stir it? A good rule to follow is that if the drink has dairy, citrus, or egg, it's gonna be shaken. And this is why cocktails like margaritas, daiquiris, sours, and even dessert-style drinks with lots of cream are always shaken and never stirred. Now, one of the most important things that shaking does to a cocktail that stirring won't is it introduces air. And the technical term is called aeration. And it's basically when tiny bubbles are formed after a vigorous shake. And these bubbles do a couple of very important things, but mostly they change the texture of the cocktail. And oftentimes they'll help to take heavier, thicker ingredients and make them lighter and airier. And they also can help to create structures like foam or even a frothy top, depending on the cocktail that you're making. Aeration can also have other effects on the drink because with all these tiny bubbles that are mixed into the cocktail, more oxygen is making contact with the ingredients. And so it can have an effect on flavor, and it also helps to take the bite out of the alcoholic burn. Now, in order to shake your drink, you're gonna need a shaker. And there's a couple of different types that you could choose from. The two most common being the 3-piece cobbler shaker with the handy dandy little lid here, and the other being the Boston shaker. And today we're gonna use a Boston shaker, and specifically a tin-on-tin Boston shaker, because this is the most commonly used shaker, and it's the kind that I like to use at home or behind the bar. Now, when it comes to using your Boston shaker, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is build your cocktail. And you'll notice that there's a larger tin and a smaller tin. Some people like to build the cocktail in the smaller tin, others in the larger tin, and mix and match where they put the ice. But honestly, it really doesn't matter. The most important thing that you need to know is that you add your ingredients first and then the ice. Never add the ice first and then pour the ingredients over, because that'll lead to over dilution and a watered down cocktail. Now, another thing to consider is how much ice you're gonna add to your shaker. And this is a little bit counterintuitive, but actually when you add less ice, the drink will water down faster. So make sure you put in enough ice so that you don't end up with a over diluted crappy drink. Now, I like to use a nice heaping scoop of ice. That's usually enough for me. Another good way to measure is to use the cheater tin if you've built it in the larger, fill it with ice and dump it in. The next step is to seal your shaker. And the way I like to do it is just use my smaller tin, place it on top, and I give it a little tap. Now, once the shaker's sealed, we need to make sure before we shake that we have a nice solid grip on it. So with a single drink like this, I like to use both hands. I'll take one hand and secure the top, and the other hand and secure the bottom of the shaker. This is just another step to make sure you don't have any accidents. Now, as far as how long you shake a cocktail for, you really don't need to shake longer than about 10 to 15 seconds. After that, the ice and the ingredients have reached what's called thermal equilibrium, which is just nerd talk for they're the same temperature, and you're pretty much not gonna get it any colder than that. Now, there are lots of different techniques when it comes to shaking your shaker. And you might see bartenders, throwing their elbow in and out while they shake, or raising the shaker up and down, doing all kinds of things that almost look like a dance. But none of that really makes that much of a difference. The key to shaking the cocktail is to make sure that ice and the liquid are going from one end to the other, the full distance of the shaker. So avoid shaking a cocktail where the ice is only traveling across the narrow part of the shaker and it's nothing side to side. And be aware of not using your wrist to shake a cocktail. So don't do anything wimpy like this, because this isn't gonna generate enough force and you're gonna end up with a watered down, crappy drink. So what I like to do is, with that double-handed grip, bring it up over my shoulder, tighten my wrists, and use my elbows to shake forward and back. And this is going to get the ice and the liquid moving as fast as possible up and down the length of the shaker. And that's the goal. Now let's talk about the one-handed shake. And basically all of the same rules apply. And that starts with you want a nice firm grip on the shaker. Because remember, these things get icy and cold and wet, and you just don't want to lose your grip on one of these. So the way that I do it is I grip from the center of the shaker using my bottom 2 fingers to grip the larger bottom tin and my top 2 fingers to grip the smaller tin on top. And I just wrap my thumb around, and this gives me a really solid grip that isn't going to come loose in my hands, and I'm securing both sides of the shaker. And basically you just want sort of like you're holding a football, right? And the motion is the same. So from the elbow, tight wrist, and get the shaker moving in a way that moves the ice to and from both ends of the shaker very quickly and hard. It's basically always the same as long as that ice is traveling in the direction that it needs to in the shaker tin. Now when it comes to shaking 2 drinks, it's pretty much the same. You're just using both hands. So you'll just grip both shakers with the one-handed grip and fire away. And there's different techniques you could use. You could shake both uniformly. You could alternate overhead. I personally like to alternate kind of up and down. Piston. Again, just as long as you're getting that ice to go the distance of the shaker very vigorously, you're going to be in good shape. Okay, so no matter which way you decided to shake your drink, eventually you've got to get this thing open and strain it off. So there's a couple of ways to do it. Now you'll notice that your shaker tin, if sealed properly, has a side that's flat where the 2 tins line up, and then a side that is sort of has this angle to it between the 2 tins. And the first way that you can get these things open is to grip it from the back flat side with your thumb pointing up. Do that with both hands, and then just press forward with your thumb. And it should snap it right open. Okay, and the second way, and my preferred method, is the palm slap. And the way that this works is with your sealed shaker, you grab it from the bottom and you bring that flat portion up against your sternum. Just put it right up against your chest. And you simply strike with your palm the side of the tin. And it pops right out pretty much every time. Now the key to doing this is you want to make sure you're gripping it from the bottom, and you want to make sure when you palm strike it, you hit at the top of the bottom tin. Don't hit the top tin, don't hit down low, just hit right there, and it will pop it out every single time. One thing you never want to do, no matter how difficult it is to get one open, is use the end of a bar or a table. Just avoid that at all costs. If you do a proper palm slap, it'll pop open. And once it is open, all you have left to do is strain that cocktail and enjoy. Okay, now let's talk about stirring. And stirring is a way to mix a cocktail that has ingredients that are basically all booze or mostly booze. These are all drinks that you really want to taste some of the subtle flavors that are in the alcohol. So drinks like Manhattans and Negronis or Old Fashions are all drinks that you would definitely want to stir. Now the whole point of stirring a cocktail is to avoid the aeration that we get with shaking. So what's great about stirring is it gives you a lot of control over dilution, which helps you control the amount of bite that you get from the alcohol. And since you're not aerating, so you're gonna have a smoother mouthfeel to it. Now, in order to stir a drink, you're always gonna need at least 2 things. You're going to need a bar spoon and some type of mixing glass. And all of these come in different shapes and sizes. When it comes to the bar spoon, I like to use something that's between 15 and 17 inches long and has a counterweight. This is a size that works great for the pros, and it also is great to learn with. Now, as far as the mixing glasses go, there's really just 2 that are the most common. And the first is just a regular old pint glass, which honestly I think is really, really good to learn in when you learn the technique. And the other is the cocktail specific mixing glass. Okay, so when it comes to actually stirring the cocktail, you're obviously going to want to build it first. And the same rule applies as it did to shaking. You want to add your ingredients to the mixing glass before you add your ice. Because again, you want to maintain control over the dilution. But once all of your ingredients are in and you're ready to stir, there is a little bit of a technique. You're going to want to avoid stirring from the center of the drink in ways that agitate the ice, and definitely don't use your spoon and jam it around inside of the mixing glass. I've literally seen people in bars line up pint glasses and just go up and down the length of them to mix them up. And that's just going to defeat everything we're trying to achieve here. Instead, we want a nice, even, smooth stir. And the way we achieve that is by stirring in a way where the spoon itself actually glides across the inside wall of the mixing glass. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this is done in a pint glass just because I feel like it's a little bit easier to learn in a pint glass. So the way that this works is you take your bar spoon and we just drop it straight down into the glass. And you will take your mixing hand, left or right-handed, it doesn't matter. And we're going to separate our two middle fingers. And we're going to reach in palm up to the spoon shaft and grip it with those two fingers. And then simply turn our palm inward. So you should have the spoon that sort of slides in front of your top two fingers and behind your bottom two. Then I just bend my hand and I use my thumb to grip the shaft. This is actually the proper way to hold a bar spoon if you stir. And now this is where the practice needs to come in. So basically, you're just going to apply pressure in the direction of the inside wall of the glass until you get to a point where all you do is flick your fingers. And if you'll notice, the spoon is now just gliding along the inside wall. This will also apply to the mixing glass, the same thing. Once you get it down, and it just goes around and around. Now, once you have the technique down and you're stirring cocktails, you're gonna need to know when to stop stirring. And a good rule of thumb is to stir a cocktail for about 30 seconds. I personally like to watch the ice, and once it starts to round off a little bit, you kind of get a feel for when a cocktail's done. But for beginners, just start at 30 seconds. It's kind of like the Goldilocks zone for making a drink. Okay, that's my episode on mixing and stirring, and I hope that you learned something or found it entertaining. And I hope that if you did learn something, you apply it and use it to make better drinks for either yourself or people that you think deserve them. Cheers. There. I just don't care. I don't care how I end these things. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to end them, and I don't care. My hernia hurts. Oh yeah, I need surgery.